Evening. I'd like to call the Tuesday, January 25th, meeting of the Independent Community Police Oversight Commission to order. Ms. Janess, can you conduct the roll call? Yes.
Commissioner Bonnie Billups. Commissioner Micaiah Shipp. Please tell your location, please. Commissioner Walton. Commissioner Stephanie Carter. Commissioner Muhammad Offman. And Commissioner Francis Totoro Hargraves.
Present, Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Randy Milgram.
Present, Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Joshua Meisler.
Present, Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Cynthia Harrison.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Okay. Chair Lisa Jackson.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Okay. Councilmember Remlawi.
Present, Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Saul.
Present, Ann Arbor.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. And I just want to take a point of privilege before we make a motion to approve the agenda. We have several new commissioners with us who have been sworn in to the Oversight Commission. And if they don't mind, I'd like to ask them just to say a few words about themselves. Commissioner Harrison.
Dr. Jackson. Good evening, my name is Cynthia Harrison, and I am from Ann Arbor, Michigan. That's right. Okay, all right, here I am. So, good evening, Cynthia Harrison from Ann Arbor, Michigan. I work for the Ann Arbor Center for Independent Living. I had a little bit of involvement with the task force back in 2016. I was going to the community meetings out at the Bryant Community Center. So I am basically really very happy to be here this evening. It's my first meeting. I currently serve on some other commissions. I serve on the 21st Century Policing Compliance Commission for Washtenaw County. I am a co-chair on the Criminal Justice Collaboration Council. I was just invited to participate with the Washtenaw Equity Partnership on the Behavioral Health Subcommittee. And so that's just a few of the things that I am doing. But I'm really thrilled to be here this evening. And thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Meisler.
Good evening. My name is Josh Meisler. I'm pleased to be joining the commission. I grew up in Ann Arbor, graduated community high school. Professionally, I'm a social worker, and I've had the opportunity to work on alternative pathways with police department, alternative to criminal justice interventions, especially for substance using individuals with police departments like Inkster and Westland and Romulus. And so that's a little bit of my experience. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. We're happy to have you. Commissioner Milgram.
Yes, hi, good evening. Can you hear me okay? Thank you for the opportunity to say hello and introduce myself. Just getting to know some of my fellow commissioners, so looking forward to getting to know folks better. I grew up in Oak Park. I went to school here as an undergrad. Went to law school at UCLA and moved back here about 30 years ago and have been making my living as a writer ever since. I've been involved in various civic organizations, and most recently I've been president of the Jewish Federation of Greater Ann Arbor, and it's through that work that I was encouraged by some members of the community to apply for this position, and I was happy to do so. Had my training a little bit last week, and just looking forward to learning more and really diving into the issues here. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much. We're excited to have all of our new commissioners, and we're looking forward to all of the contributions that they'll make in the future. At this time, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The agenda is approved. Now we've come to the time for public forum. We do have some members of the public here with us today. If there's anybody who would like to participate in the public forum, they can step to the podium, and they have 3 minutes to make a comment, ask questions, or address the Independent Community Police Oversight Commission. Is there anybody who would like to do so? All right, we will move on. There'll be a time for additional comment at the end of our meeting. You all have a copy of the minutes from our last meeting, which was in November, and I assume you have had a chance to review them. Is there any discussion of those minutes, or is there a motion to approve them as is? Any corrections, comments, thoughts? Or a motion to approve them?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor of approving the minutes from November?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So we have a little bit of old business. Ann Arbor enacted a resolution in April, I believe, thank you, that the city administrator would undertake an exploration of an unarmed response program for the city of Ann Arbor. In December, there was a draft sort of statement that was released to the public, and I thought we might take some time to discuss an unarmed response plan. At this time, ICPOC has not made a formal statement about such a plan, but we will. But we thought we might talk about, if anybody would like to talk about what they might want from an unarmed response plan, this might be a good time to do so. I know we will have subsequent discussion, why they might find that to be important, or how they might like to see the city proceed going forward. I think I can say that the resolution itself from City Council was clear that there are times when there are crisis calls and an armed presence exacerbates situations and is not helpful in those situations. And the goal is for there to be an alternative response such that when there are crisis calls where an armed presence would be problematic or not useful, that there be an avenue for people to receive assistance from people who are trained in behavioral health, for example, or who are arriving without a gun, such that if a situation escalates, there is no cause for concern about a firearm being used. And so we have seen, and I know this commission has received lots of information about unarmed response plans from all across the country. There are lots of models that we might follow. Certainly, we would adopt whatever those models to make them appropriate for this particular culture so that they work in Ann Arbor. But I think it's clear that that across the country, unarmed response plans are found to be useful. I was able to participate in a seminar this summer sponsored by Public Health Awakened that I know some of you attended. And those public health officials from across the country, including from the CAHOOTS program in Eugene, Oregon, there were lots of people who've talked about how those unarmed response programs have fared in their cities. And one of the things they said that stuck with me was that no municipality is sorry that they have implemented such a program. That they have found and I've gotten a chance to talk to administrators of the Cahoots program and Mental Health First in California and other programs around the country. And one of the things they say is that oftentimes their police officers are relieved at not having to kind of take those kinds of calls, for which they do not have social work training, behavioral mental health training, for example. They're not experts in that. That people fare better in those situations, and that overall, from all of the stakeholders in their communities, none of them have felt sorry that they've implemented such a program. So I hope that we'll be able to do something here. Commissioner Carter.
I just, said pull it close. I wanted to thank you, our chairperson. We got some more information just this afternoon, and I have not had a chance to digest all of it. But I do think, interestingly enough, some of those programs, the unarmed response worked separately from the police, and some of them, they would go out with the police department. And I think, as you say, we need to sort of see, and working with the department, hopefully, and to see what's going to work best in Ann Arbor. But I certainly do support the idea of some kind of unarmed response team here in Ann Arbor, and I look forward to working on that.
I think it's one of the most important things we might do. Vice Chair Todoro Hargreaves.
So I think one of the things that I'd be interested in as we're moving forward with regard to the city's recommendation document and also the resolution from April is a good understanding of what ICPOC's role in this process is going to be. Our role is police oversight. So that means if police are involved, we should be able to have an opportunity to make recommendations, look at policy, and see just how involved police are going to be. I know there are some folks that may say, oh, well, this is a public health thing, so you don't necessarily need to be involved. But again, you hear a lot of things about co-response and that officers will be going. And I think at that point, our involvement should be, okay, what is their role? How much time are they spending? How many calls do they go on? What exactly is their training? That's our role as far as police oversight. So I would really be interested in seeing how we're going to play into this process of developing the best program for the city of Ann Arbor. I would think that it could be, depending on how the city chooses to go, we could have a bigger role than another direction they go in. But I would think that at some point, as long as the officers are involved in responding to these calls, we should have some hands-on involvement in the development of the program.
Thank you. I think one of the things that's happened too in the city is that many of us spent a lot of time in the past few months exploring unarmed response programs because it was of interest to this commission. And so there is a degree to which we have some expertise to lend in those conversations, even if it means that it is not an area that we oversee in the end, which is absolutely fine if, law enforcement from, Ann Arbor Police Department is not involved. So it may be that we have some involvement in the beginning and none at all in the end,
Right.
which is also fine. I think, as Commissioner Carter stated, it's got to fit Ann Arbor. It's got to make sure it makes sense for Ann Arbor. And certainly we understand that we're sitting in a county that also has a law enforcement presence as well, and that if Ann Arbor goes in its own direction, it's going to interact, at least on some level, with the county system, whether that is setting up something that ends up being completely separate or something that overlaps in some way. None of that has been determined. But we certainly understand the climate in which we're working, so. Commissioner Billups?
Yeah, I think part of the responsibility also is for us to, as we have been, make sure that we listen to what officers are saying and what they feel that their needs are, along with what the community needs are, and helping to be a bridge between, understanding of all those things. Unarmed response has worked in a lot of areas. Some of the stuff that I've looked at has been, they've had a very robust 911 presence that makes it work well, that the assessment starts with 911, and then that decision is made as to if armed officers or the teams are sent out. So, I mean, I think we have a county where everything centrally gets dispatched from one 911 service. So it will involve maybe some involvement or some connections with other municipalities or the county as this moves forward at some point. And at this point, we're just exploring it and looking into it. But it's definitely something we should spend some time and some efforts looking into, so.
Thank you. You made me think about Detroit, for example, is experimenting with having social workers in their dispatch and sort of triaging there and sending people out there, and the data and the analysis of how that's working isn't in yet. There are some pros to that and there's some cons to that. The city of San Diego, I think I pointed out to you guys earlier, is maybe similar to us. They have a program that's run by the county, and then the citizens of the city of San Diego wanted something different, and so they have another program that is not through that centralized dispatch. And so they have a tandem programs running, one by the county that encompasses, a bigger area, and one that is within the city itself that does not involve any law enforcement at all. And so the possibilities for this kind of thing are endless. I think the will is here probably to do that, to have some sort of program, and how it shakes out will be interesting, but I hope this is something we can continue to discuss. Councilmember Song.
I'm really pleased that we're having this discussion here in person. This was a resolution that I helped co-sponsor last April. It was important to me that this would be one of the many responses I hope City Council provides to the community as a follow-up to its statement before I was even seated, where we recognize that racism is a public health crisis. And I strongly believe unarmed response is a response to inequities in our community and making sure our community members are safe, and that we don't and they're not criminals. And depending on the need and the situation, we should have a multitude of ways of responding. A good example is what happens in our downtown library. We do not have police in our library. And this is a large public space where we have thousands of people, pre-COVID times, across all members of our community engaged in a public space. And we had staff there who were concentrating on making sure that when folks are in crisis with mental health, substance abuse, whatever the situation might be, unless there were weapons drawn or there was an immediate threat, AAPD was not engaged. But there's still partnership there should such situations escalate. But I really like that model of, the library's ethos is trying to find the right answers, right? Like how do you find the answers to questions? How do you find solutions to problems? And I'm really excited the city will hopefully have a similar approach. I just wanted to point out to a couple examples in other cities, in much smaller cities, have implemented a program like this, where they've concentrated efforts in maybe a small geography, and police are really only involved at the dispatch level, but the actual crisis response team were a team of social workers and representatives from different social service agencies. We have social service agency staff and members here at this table, and I'm really hoping that now that this memo is out from city staff, we can start engaging social service agencies. Bonnie, I need to tell you, I'm hopefully volunteering you as being a host, because I would really like to see these conversations in community. It's having folks come to commission meetings can be difficult, but if we're talking about a program that could be impacting a fair number of community members, it'd be nice to actually have those conversations closer and more accessible to folks. So right now, one of the conversations in the city is that we're trying to see if we could have different neighborhoods host the discussions and try to see if we can invite more ideas and not just have it come from politicians or city staff. So thank you.
Thank you. It's so important, and I think when we're talking about community conversations, lots of times young people are left out of those conversations. And so one of the things I want to do is just kind of put a plug out there for Saturday, March 12th, where we have Commissioner Shipp, who is hosting a youth forum at the Michigan League. Yes, at the Michigan League, sorry, I was thinking about the location, where we're going to ask young people to talk about their vision of public safety. Is there anything you want to kind of add to that?
Yeah, I can just add to, just like even going back to the unarmed response conversation, like I can give you an example from my own experience this past week, actually. There was a homeless man in our dorm, and he wasn't behaving erratically or anything. He was just sitting there, and we had some police officers come in and address that matter, and they were armed. And so I just want to like allow community members to understand how that is our home space and how that would make students feel, knowing that there are armed police members within where we're sleeping, where we're doing, you know, schoolwork or whatever the case may be, how that make us feel. And so this forum that we have coming up is to allow students to be able to vocalize their experiences, vocalize what they want to see for policing in the future, or if they even see, if they're optimistic about it, because sometimes the case is that they're not optimistic about it. And so if that's the case, we also want to understand that. We want to just hear youth voices and take that into account when we're thinking about things that we're advocating for in the future, if it's actually motivated by what they actually want to see, or is it what we want to see. So yeah, that's what's going to be happening on March 12th in the Michigan League. I hope you guys come.
Yes, and to clarify, we will have some college students, but also some high school students and perhaps other students who are interested as well. So we will keep you all posted about that. But it's important, as Councilmember Song has talked about, going out in the community. People can't always come to city council meetings. They can't always call in. They can't always Zoom in. But we need to get input from all members of all areas, all segments of our community, even those that are harder to reach, which just means that we need to work harder, the city needs to work harder in terms of doing that kind of outreach, and to make sure that there is broad representation when decisions are made about topics such as unarmed response, but other topics in the city. We need to understand, and we need to get perspective from everybody else. We are richer for that. Any other thoughts on unarmed response? Commissioner Meisler.
Thank you. When I think about this issue, I think about it in terms, I have a concern that the discussion becomes strictly a public health crisis response discussion, and we turn into, I see that in some other communities, it really becomes two different pathways towards service. And I think that the impetus for these reforms is pretty specifically about the relationship between police departments and the people who make these calls and the people who are present when these calls are made. Which is why I think that even though we have the complexity of the way that 911 works here, I would really hope that we are advocating, that we may end up advocating that these services do kind of come through 911, and the fact that that's a complexity that needs to be negotiated is kind of the nature of the problem here. There's a lot of behavioral health crises in our community, and there's a lot of providers who do great care there, and maybe some of our providers are partners in whatever comes out of this. But I think it's important to keep it on the emergency service response track, because that's what this is really about. It's not about the fact, although there are lots of gaps in care, and there's lots of agencies that could do better and that aren't funded well enough, and all of those things, this unarmed response is about 911 response to nonviolent and other community needs that go through that system. So those are some of my thoughts about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Milgram.
Yes, thanks. I have a question, I guess, more than a comment, and I guess I'll address it to the chair about funding, because I know, the staff memo, they seem to be open to the idea of the plan, but it had some concerns about funding, and I know that there was a forum last week or so where there was a discussion about it, which unfortunately I was not able to make, and I think you may have been there, others may have been there, so I'm curious what we know so far about funding and what's available, what are some of the things being discussed about funding?
I don't think I don't think there's a definitive answer about funding, from where, how much. The city has made lots of proposals of what to do with American Rescue Plan funding, for example. And there was a tentative proposal, and all of the proposals can be negotiated and navigated for $2 million from that fund to go towards setting up an unarmed response. But that does not, that would not keep it up and running year over year. And so there would be, you would need to build that into a budget. And of course, we always say that a city's budget is reflective of its values, and so we would hope that if it were important to the city, they would build that into the budget. But I don't think that no one has come up with a specific plan yet, so nobody's come up with a program outline such that they know exactly how much money they need, and thus have asked the city for that. So very early stages yet of talking, and so I think, the ARPA funding meetings that happened last week were pretty general in nature. And what they were doing was they were encouraging people to kind of say, is this program important to you? Is this something that the city should spend its money on? As opposed to how much should they spend and for what? How many cars? How many people? That kind of thing. So not specific at all yet. Councilmember Song?
I can add a little bit to that. So right now, there's just a really rough cost estimate to the program, but that's before community engagement has even happened, and this is before partners have been engaged. In other cities, we've seen this program engage local healthcare providers. So if there's I think El Paso, there was a partnership with the local hospital, and they were able to get funding from there, as well as funding from community foundation. So there's a couple of possibilities on how to pursue funding. Right now with the ARPA funding, there are, I think, 11 buckets or 11 different programs that are being proposed by staff. And it's basically a competition for $24 million. I think all of those buckets and total up to almost $50 million. So it's really up to the community to respond, is to see if this is a program that the community would like to have priority, or that they would like to see this be funded and take priority. There's a survey that will be published the end of this week, where folks can participate and I think just rank or give feedback on what they would like to see the federal monies be used for. I think there's a 2-week time period to respond to that. So I encourage everyone here to participate. And again, what's on there's actually a website where you can see all these projects listed, and the staff have also created videos describing each one, including unarmed crisis response. So hopefully the community has some information to understand why this is one of the proposals, and I hope I think a lot of service providers are excited, and we'll hopefully see some comments and responses from folks there. But again, so look, I think maybe I can rely on our chair to send that link out at the end of this week to everyone.
Any other thoughts before we move on? Councilmember Romlawi.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for the discussion, the opportunity to discuss this important issue that we've been talking about for almost a year now. A couple great questions and points that were made by our commissioners, our new commissioners. Thank you. For keeping the focus on the 911 response. It's real easy to have mission creep because there's a lot of overlap in this plan. But to focus on that so we can be effective, I think, is important. Funding, Randy, great question. It's always number 1, 2, or 3 of any conversation. You need the residual funding. The American Rescue Plan is a one-time infusion. It'll help get this it'll help get it started. Hopefully the community responds and stuffs the ballot box with this being a top priority. There's funds in that 11 or 12 different proposals that are being put forth. Some of those ideas can be funded from other sources of money. This is something, it's going to be hard to have that luxury. It needs to come from the general fund, and you need this one-time infusion. So it's great to get it started with that, but then we also need to look at a residual funding, which I have my ideas on it. I'm not sure if enough of my colleagues agree with me, but that'll come out later. The community support and the community participation in this has already been great. We've had experts in these fields coming together and discussing with staff and with council members. I believe the group is called Re-envisioning Our Safety, Washtenaw County, where they've laid out pretty well how to get things started. It's not perfect, but it gives a pretty good framework. And, there's that going on, and there's also a diversion and deflection program hopefully going to be launched in the city prosecuting office. And so there's a lot coming together. Hopefully, we can steer it to get us the results that we deserve and need and the community wants. I just feel at this point the report that we got from the administrator was giving us information but not giving us recommendations. And we got a pretty good lay of the land on how other communities in the nation have responded. There's hybrids and there's all sorts of different combinations. So hopefully there's a champion and a steering committee of sorts that can really focus the conversation on getting us a plan so we're not just spinning our wheels too long, because folks need this and they need it yesterday.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Song?
I just want to add that in other cities, this is actually presented a cost savings when it comes to just coordinating response in a more efficient way. If you look at the Cahoots program, the folks behind the program have stated they've saved $15 million a year in costs through ER diversion and picking up calls that would have otherwise gone to law enforcement or EMS, which are more expensive responses. And then also, Cahoots has also looked at actually their funding initially came from the police budget. So again, we have different options. We have different ways of looking at this as cost savings, as working in partnership with our own police. I think in the memo actually also includes response work with our fire department. So it's not just police, it's not just social workers. We have a variety of folks who work in crisis care in our community that we can engage. So we're just at the very beginning. The memo is just kind of a sketch of what's happening, what's possible, what other cities have done pretty successfully for years. I think Cahoots was 2017, so we're only 5 years behind and just beginning. So hopefully this year will be a good year for imagining, just using our imaginations as we recover from so many things and be creative. And when we look at funding, long-term funding, because these are long-term issues that need long-term care. All right, thanks.
Thank you. And I know we're going to move on, but I'd encourage people as they think about this to think about cost savings, to think about being more efficient, but also to think about what it costs us when people are in crisis, whether that's a mental health crisis, a behavioral crisis, some other kind of crisis, and for whatever reason, their behavior gets criminalized. And when people get put into the criminal legal system, we lose their talents, we lose their potential, we lose their contributions to society. And that's as important, that's as much more important, I think, than money. Money is important. We understand you guys are running a city here, and so we understand budgets. But I think we often don't think about what else gets lost when people get in the criminal legal system and often can't get out. I mean, lots of people get out, sometimes at great cost, sometimes after great length. And it's not just the people, not a single person. It's a family, it's a neighborhood, and we all lose when that happens. And so to the degree that we can avoid that happening by giving people appropriate services from appropriate people at the time at which they need them, then we are all winning. So, Commissioner Harrison.
That will be a good time for me to interject. The personal cost from one arrest, I can speak to that personally. The effect that it has on the community, the effect that it has on the one individual, basically, just from one arrest. When you onboard into the criminal legal system, it's very difficult to get out of it. And it really is a huge personal cost to the individual, to the family, and to the community as a whole. And so you're absolutely right about that cost, and thank you for, bringing that up. And those that know me know that I can speak to that very personally, and I'm sure you'll hear me talking about that a lot.
Yep.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your own experience, because I think sometimes people feel like this is remote from them, but it's not. It's very close to home, and things happen, and it could be any of us, even though that doesn't always seem possible, but it could be any of us at any time, so. A short discussion perhaps of the Community Policing Innovation Fund grant, which, so the Independent Community Police Oversight Commission is in partnership with Southeast Criminal Research Project at Southeast Michigan Criminal Research Project at Eastern Michigan University. It's funded by the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan. And the goal of the grant is to have the city, by way of the police department and the Oversight Commission, come together with researchers and statisticians and analyze traffic stop data for 2017, 2018, and 2019. Data are also available for 2020, but would be analyzed separately because that was kind of COVID traffic policing, completely different than any other year, but and analyze that data and look at it. What the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan wants, however, is for lots of people to come together and talk about what they hope for that data, what they hope could come out of such an analysis, what they'd like to see, and also how they'd like it disseminated. We've had some interest from some commissioners here in participating in that as well. I just want to make sure I'm extending that offer publicly. So if there's anybody here who wants to participate in those meetings, you have someone from the police department, someone from the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan, the SMART group from Eastern Michigan University coming together to talk about how to do that. The group meets fairly infrequently. It's not a huge drain on anyone's time. A smaller subset of the group meets more often to talk about the nuts and bolts of statistical analysis. If you are nerdy in that way, please join. But if you would like to think about the big picture of what could that information do, how could it be helpful to the city? Obviously, transparency is a big word, and we use that a lot here. But what does that really mean? No one knows what the data will show us yet. It has yet to be analyzed. The group at Eastern has been working on it diligently for months. But part of the purpose of the group is to come together and talk about what we might, how the data might be useful to the community. Not to the Oversight Commission, but to everybody in Ann Arbor. What might it tell us? What could we do with it when we find out what it says, whatever that is? And how should we communicate that information, disseminate that information? should we write a report? Should we go around and should we have town halls? Should we go to people and talk about it? And so this group will meet to talk about those issues. So please let me know if you're interested. I know a couple of you have expressed some interest. We're very excited to sit in partnership with all the parties at the table and talk about what it might do for us. The police department has given some indication of how the data might be useful to them, for example. We were able to talk with Deputy Chief Forsberg at a prior meeting about how that might be useful to the police department. We know that it could be useful to the public. We know that, collecting good data is challenging from police departments. And so anytime we get a chance to do that, we're happy about it. So I just wanted to bring that up and make sure. Commissioner Carter, were you about to jump in? You looked like it.
Yeah, I just had, I was looking at the report from the state police that they did in conjunction with, I think, the Michigan State School of Criminal Justice or something like that. I thought it was I was just wondering if the same methodology that they used could be useful for us. I thought it was interesting that they divided the whole state. Of course, this is state police. They divided the whole state up into regions. And the region where Washtenaw County is, as far as the statistics that they could come up with, showed that the arrests, traffic stops of Americans of African descent was above what would be expected based on population numbers. But it still couldn't come to that didn't translate into intentional discrimination. And at that point, the report says they have to do even more study to figure out, exactly what's going on here. So I think it's very useful. I don't know, I'm just wondering, are we going to have to reinvent the wheel, or is this something that we can use the same type of methodology that was used in that study? I thought it's to me, was an unexpected result, but interesting.
We're really lucky that Dr. Kevin Karpiak at Eastern Michigan University is a criminologist, sociologist, and he's got a team of statisticians and other sociologists and criminologists and other ologists as well, working the data, and they have dragged me into it. I'm pretty decent quantitative statistician. I am not a qualitative person, and they have made my brain hurt. But one of the analyses that Michigan State did is called the veil of darkness. And lots of people have asked questions about that. And so there's a hypothesis that some racial profiling might happen more if you can see the ethnicity of the driver. And so one of the questions that was asked of the Michigan State Police data was, were African Americans pulled over disproportionately during the day as compared to the night? And the answer was yes. However, Dr. Karpiak has been schooling me. He has a syllabus. So I go to class every week. And one of the things he talked about, and I could figure this out too, just thinking it through, is that people drive differently in the day and the night. They're driving for different purposes. They're going to different locations. And so maybe comparing day and night isn't a good indication of a disparity in that way, because you might have different pools. So you might have different subject pools, right? So another way to do that would be to look at the exact same time of day on one Monday, and then look at the exact same time of day on the Monday when daylight savings has changed. And so now you are perhaps looking at the same pool of drivers, but now it's slightly darker, and do you see a disparity there? So they have gotten me down in the weeds with this. But the Michigan State Police data has used some analyses that might be useful to us, maybe not quite as useful as they thought. I think you brought up an amazing point, which is one that I'd like to caution everybody about. Looking at data in that way, probably responsible researchers are never going to say that that means there's racial bias. because that is an intent and that is an internal construct that you could discern by asking someone perhaps, but not by looking at data. And so I think when we come up with the data, no report that we produce is going to say this is racist. What we're going to show are disparities, we're going to show differences, we're going to show maybe differences based on the expected population, based on these numbers in Ann Arbor, what you would expect to see, and this is different from what's expected. But I don't think the conclusions are going to be that it's racist. We're going to see that, you know, are there differences in driving by age, by gender, by, you know, perceived ethnicity? You guys have had some robust conversations here about whether we should ask people, which no one is asking the police to ask people their ethnicity here. We let that go. And perhaps it's more important what a police officer thinks than what a person, the actual ethnicity is. So these conversations have been so informative, and I'd just like to invite you all to continue to participate in them if you like, with the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan, and certainly Dr. Karpiak's data analysis group is happy to invite all comers. So just let me know if you are willing to join.
If I haven't let you know already, I'm willing to join. The other thing that they looked at that I thought was very interesting was what, by race, those who were stopped, how many were just given a ticket, just a warning, or were actually arrested.
Or searched.
Or searched, and the car searched. Those are all statistics that they were able to put together. And
the Ann Arbor Police traffic stop data show that as well, so that will be an analysis that they'll be able to make as well. And I think one of the things we won't be able to see, though, is something else that's really interesting, which is time. So for how long was someone stopped? Because right now, I don't think we have a start and stop time to every stop, but maybe that'll be something that we could have in the future. But even if you're stopped and given a warning, are you stopped for 4 minutes or are you stopped for 20 minutes? And there's lots of literature on what that might mean, and would there be disparities in that kind of thing as well. So that sort of inconvenience, that stressor of being stopped, is that different? So there are lots of interesting things that we might find, and I think one of the things that will happen is we'll be able to ask some interesting questions, and maybe we will ask council to ask that different data be collected. Because we know it was due to council in 2009, Francis, that they began to collect gender. So gender of people driving was not something that was collected until, fairly recently, but at the behest of council. All right, so we do have some new business. Kind of continuing on with some of the discussions of that came up during ARPA meetings, there was a discussion of the Community and Law Enforcement Public Safety Data Platform funding. Chief Cox is here, and so he can correct me if I'm wrong. The ask, and council, you guys know, I'm sure, $1.26 million for a data platform for the police department was one of the proposals for ARPA funding. You have probably heard me joke that the police department keeps data on legal pads and drawers, and that we can analyze traffic stop data because it's entered at the scene, but lots of other kinds of questions we might ask, we can't ask because there isn't good data collection. That's not a problem that's unique to Ann Arbor. It is one that needs to be remedied. One of the questions we had, though, is what would that money cover? Does that cover software? Does it cover renewing, does it cover software updates in perpetuity or just for 1 year or 3 years? Does it come with training for data entry, et cetera? Chief, do you want to speak to that?
Am I coming through? Yeah, there we go. All right. Yeah, so the proposed amount we put out there was really about to go through the process of actually determining, which vendor could fit our needs, and then the cost around, associated with it, whether it's a service contract or training and things like that, that's probably negotiable. during that process at some point. And so I can't answer some of those for you now, particularly around, does that include training and things of that sort, because that would be determined in the process itself of actually trying to acquire the system itself. So the dollar amount that you saw was based off of similar software platforms that are out there currently, and then what they say, the devil's in the details. As we get closer to it, if we happen to get this grant, when we're going through the process, those are the questions that we would ask during the process of, is training included? We can actually demand some of those things, right? The training's included, or certain aspects are in there, and so we have to get to that point so I can answer those questions. But taking input in a little later on is certainly important, to make sure that we answer some of your questions regarding that then.
I was able to, everybody got a notice from me today, sorry, about a forum tomorrow, the Department of Justice starting to fund data platforms and identify sources of funding for law enforcement agencies, because data collection is so important. You want to know who's being arrested for what, how much, how often. That's just critical information that every community should have access to. And my job, one of my jobs is to ask really hard questions, and so I know this is a sore spot, but since our data person is no longer here, is there a degree to which this process of identifying that software is now delayed in some way? Are we going to be set back while you have to replace that person? What should we expect from that process?
So, again, a tough question in the sense that, that Jeff did actually recently resign, and he has another position. However, this need that we have is a need, and I'm sure the IT department and the police, in the city here, will step up to help us make sure that we move forward in actually getting this system in place. So I don't think it'll be an issue regarding, delays as far as, the appropriate personnel being involved in the process.
I think one of the things that we're concerned about as a commission, and several other people can jump in here, is that when the city gets data collection software, we know it's not an if, but a when, that we certainly would like to be consulted and have some input on what kinds of data are collected, because there may be questions that we would ask that you wouldn't ask, and so certainly not that you shouldn't collect data, but I would imagine that we might have some additional things that we'd like to think about, so we certainly like to be a part of that process. We'll be lobbying council to do that. And I think that as we have access to other information to which the public is not necessarily privy, we would also like that to be the case with a data dashboard, that we would be able to see data, whether that is released to the public or not. Certainly one of the foundational concepts of civilian oversight is access to information and access to data. Vice Chair Todoro Hargraves, did you want to speak to the process of selecting the software at all?
Yes, okay, I'm on. Yeah, I would love to be able to know what companies you are looking at, and what kind of software we would be thinking might be applicable to Ann Arbor, and, what's applicable to the IT systems we have. I think a lot of people that know me know my background is actually geography, so I love seeing maps. I love seeing as much information as possible loaded into a geographic information system so we can look at information that way. It's very visual, it's easy to read. So I would love to see a system that can load directly into a GIS platform for us so that we can see things very quickly. But again, I would just think that it would be great if we could see which software specifically or the type that you're looking at for this.
Well, I would say thank you. I would say that certainly there'll be an RFP process involved with that. So it's not a matter of just picking a vendor. You'd have to go through a process and make sure that they meet the specs of what we require. And secondly, this is not just about data. It's really about how we compile all the things that we do and how do they connect. And so it's more about records management and how we collect it. And then the newer formats of these make it so that you can actually see correlations in things that you're doing that you didn't even know, because the fact is they all connect. And when things connect and flow in that way, you're able to pull more information. The more information you have, the more you're able to see correlations or things of that sort. So the reality is that our records management system is a very fairly old system. And if you get something far more robust, you might be able to, or let's put it this way, it's highly likely we're able to see more correlations around, patterns and things that we don't see now because we just don't have the ability to look at that data. And then, of course, the issue around transparency, the better the system you have, then the easier it is to actually share that with the public and pull this information. So, that's the goal of what we're trying to do here. And if we're successful, and I think that we will be, I think that we'll have far more transparency, and I think that we can have far more robust discussions about what it is that we do, don't do, and what's the impact of some of those things.
Any other thoughts on that before we move on? Councilmember Song?
I've been asking for a while I'm pretty sure I've shared on a couple times in this commission and city council and with staff, open data policing, nc.com, and that's North Carolina's open data traffic stops. And this is a project by the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. And you can locate an officer's career stop and search history, review departmental enforcement patterns, compare enforcement practices among officers and jurisdictions. There are other examples of this around the country. So hopefully, as this discussion progresses, it's not such a heavy lift knowing that other communities have gone down this path to provide transparency. On the front page, it says, this platform presents the information in a manner that increases the transparency of the Fayetteville Police Department and improves the community and police relationship. So it's not like a criticism of how we do work. It's just trying to, I think, have a community be able to wrap its arms around what it's funding and what kind of partnerships exist or can be improved upon. So wherever we go internally, and we can have this discussion with Chief Cox and other city staff to see how this moves forward. Hopefully, maybe we can also, if we can take what's happening with this partnership with the Community Foundation of Southeast Michigan and take what we learned there. Hopefully, it's a more informed approach than just saying, all data is good data and we just need access to all the data. I think we need to be able to curate it a little bit to give some context and align ourselves what the shared mission and goals are around a project like this.
Thank you. There's a couple lessons we can take from North Carolina too. 20 years ago, I believe this year, they mandated that police data be public. But it took about 19 years. It was actually a University of North Carolina professor, I believe, who took the data and began to analyze it. So they'd been collecting it, hadn't done anything with it. And a researcher then took that data, began to analyze it, and began to look at it, and then started encouraging municipalities to build out these dashboards. And you mentioned that it will talk about, here's an officer's particular, pattern of this or that or the other. And so they weren't obscuring officer information. They were just sharing it as public servants. And so I think there's a lot that we can learn from that. One, we've got to collect the data. Two, we've actually got to analyze and do something with it. And three, it isn't going to upset the city if you see what Officer A is doing versus what Officer B is doing. It just is what it is. And when people have the data and have access to it, we have talked about how, we live in a community that is rich with researchers who are able to look and make ask lots of interesting questions of data. And we should all be open to that. Because these are things that only improve our city. I think we are past the point of thinking that if we sort of hide things or protect things, somehow that's making them better. I think we expose things to the light and we all grow from there. And in places where information has been able to be made public, nothing has exploded. It's been fine. So thank you for that. I also want to just do a brief update and then a brief maybe recruitment call. So there is a coalition from this Independent Community Police Oversight Commission, the Human Rights Commission, and the Transportation Commission. We are jointly working together to introduce a traffic transparency resolution to council and make some asks of traffic stop data, for example. Many people see traffic stops actually as a transportation safety issue, not a law enforcement issue, so different municipalities handle that differently. But I wanted to say that coalition is up and running. We are working on a document now. Commissioner Meisler has jumped in. If there is anybody else who'd like to participate in that from this commission, please do so. We've got a Google Doc that multiple people are editing and thinking about how we might make a resolution to council and what. There are multiple rationales from the human rights perspective, from the transportation perspective, and from the police oversight perspective about why it might be wise to make all traffic stop data public. And certainly one of those arguments would be such that it could be analyzed by other groups who have the time, energy, and resources to ask interesting questions about it. So we're fortunate to be partnered with SMART to do it for this finite period of time, but to have that data open and accessible to researchers everywhere, like the Stanford Open Policing Project, like the North Carolina Open Project that Councilmember Song just mentioned, would probably be beneficial to our city. So we are up and running on that and expect to make a resolution to council shortly. So if anyone would like to join in that effort also, please just say the word. No thoughts on that? Then the next thing we have to do is approve the 2022 calendar. Everybody has a copy of potential meeting dates. City council chambers were not available on the fourth Tuesday in February, and so there's a suggestion that we meet instead on February 8th, which is just 2 weeks from today, and then the subsequent meeting would be March 22nd, which would be 6 weeks later. It is important, I know most of you have carved out kind of the fourth Tuesday. If we would not have a quorum on the 8th, if not enough people could attend, then we could forego that meeting and just continue to do our work. Is there a discussion of the calendar? Commissioner Tadora Hargreaves.
I would like to propose that the December 27th meeting be canceled.
Yep.
We skip that one.
Any other suggestions? I feel we almost always, December 27th is a tough meeting date to make for many people in Ann Arbor. And so I think we have not met in December. It's interesting, when this commission was formed, the suggestion was that we meet every other month. And very quickly we realized that wasn't going to work. We needed to meet every month, and we were doing so much work in between. But I don't think we have met at the end of December ever. So probably that we can vote on that, but that seems like a reasonable suggestion right off the top. Any other suggested changes? How do you all feel about the 8th?
I will be questionable for that date.
Anybody else feel like they might be questionable?
I'm questionable on that date also.
Okay, so we got 2 questionable. I apologize. We had a commissioner who was not able to be here today, who added some thoughts for traffic transparency, so I have to take a step back. Apologize, wanted to read them in. The comments are, we need the traffic stop data for transparency to identify areas for improvement and to measure progress over time. At first, we should be looking for broad patterns, maybe hot spots that stand out, and what data might be missing. would be an opportunity then to work on collecting missing information. And make sure to, in terms of reporting that data, it would be important to make sure that ideally the information were also presented with graphics that are quick and easy to understand. Okay, which made me think that we should check with our commissioners who are not here, who are not feeling well enough to attend, about the February date as well. We can take a vote now about whether to approve the agenda as is, with the understanding that we might have to cancel the February 8th meeting if not enough people will be able to attend. Does that make sense to people? And with having stricken December 27th from that potential schedule, does that seem amenable to people? Is there a motion to vote on the schedule as just discussed?
I make that motion.
Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so our next meeting is potentially February 8th, but if we do not meet on that date, it would be March 22nd. I don't think there are any reports from committees at this time. Am I mistaken in that? Any other communications that commissioners would like to make? Public comment or public forum, is there anyone who would like to make a comment at this time? Please come forward. Is the microphone on green?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Can I pull this down just a little?
Yes.
Okay. I haven't been active because I'm sick of Zoom, so I'd like to thank you all for at least having a meeting where we can look and see each other and have a public meeting, and that's why I'm here. And I wasn't going to speak, but I just have to say something to you all and to Chief Cox. Oh, I forgot. I'm Shirley Beckley from Ann Arbor, Michigan. On the data, it just hurts my heart to hear that we are still trying to figure that out. We have asked for that as the community before you all were even formed or thought about. Well, not thought about, because we've thought about you for many years. We just recently got this commission going. But it just shouldn't be, with all the technology and with all what the U of N and Eastern Michigan can offer in data and statistics, that we still can't get this resolved. So it sounds to me, as someone in the community, and I'm really, we're trying to work with you and bridge this gap between the police and the community, but it just doesn't make sense to me that we're still trying to figure this out, and we got a lot of stuff that can help us. I remember a few years ago, I asked what was the racial breakdown for the police department, and I was told that they didn't have those statistics, which I didn't believe. So I just would like to say to Chief Cox and to this commission that I know you're doing the best that you can, and we can't make miracles happen. I understand that. But it just seems, from someone from the community that's been here over 70 years, and we're still asking for this data. And I know, because I've been arrested before, that the police take reports, and there's data in those reports, so you have access to the data. So I just don't understand why that data can't be processed, so that we have some kind of information about racial breakdown and gender breakdown and whatever else breakdown we need. So I would just ask you, Chief Cox, to see what you can do to expedite that. You have the U of M, you have Eastern Michigan, you have the community. We have a lot of data we can give you if you want it. So I just think that there's some things that can be done to expedite that. It just hurts me to hear that we're still asking, and they're asking. And we created this commission to get all this, and we're still asking. And I'm not happy with the answer. So thank you. I also would like to thank this commission for all that you have done and all that is getting done, even though we got a long way to go. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to acknowledge that, how painful that is, that after so long, you are still not seeing something that you've been asking for a long time. And I want to acknowledge that many historians and many criminologists would say that police data are opaque on purpose. And so please don't think we don't understand that as long as data are inaccessible, we cannot look at it, we cannot do our jobs, we cannot make evaluations about what's going on. That could be because there's no money, there's no time. It could also be because there's no will. But whatever the case, the outcome, no matter what the intent, is that we can't ask and answer questions when we don't have access to data. And it is a problem that we don't have it after all of this time. And it is a problem that many groups before have asked for something that still does not exist. So I just want to acknowledge that we understand that.
And I understand your position.
Yeah. Madam Chair, can I just thank Ms.
Commissioner
Beckley?
Carter, you may.
Thank you. Thank Ms. Beckley for coming out and for the comments that you had not intended to make. You know, there are a lot of things that the community would like to know. And I'm just going to put myself out here at this point. One of them is, how many of our police officers live in the city of Ann Arbor? I'd like to know that. I'd like to know if there's a way, and Chief, I don't expect you to answer this at this point. I was horrified after my husband and I were watching TV on this January 6th last year. And I kept saying, where are the police? And it horrifies me to hear since then that many of these, the white nationalists and the Proud Boys and these people are in the police department. I don't know, without violating people's rights and so forth, how we can find that out. But I think it's important that when we talk about transparency, I'd like this to be fully transparent. And those are two things that, I don't know, it really doesn't come within necessarily our purview. But I'd like to know if somebody who's pulling me over is a member of the Proud Boys, that personally. So anyway, I thank you for your input and for coming out today.
Any other thoughts, comments? Thank you for all of your contributions. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you.